They left him out there to roast under the merciless sky, like some beast already judged and sentenced. No trial, no chance at mercy. Just coarse rope, gnawing at his wrists, and a rough canvas sack cinched tight over his head. The August sun in Dry Creek, New Mexico, doesn't forgive. It crawls into your lungs and strips the water out of you until all that's left is dust. Sweat carved thin rivers down his back, sliding over the kind of muscle a man only builds through years of hard labor or harder fights. All around, the townsfolk stood gathered. At first, there had been shouting, cursing, even spit hurled his way. Then it shifted to laughter, the ugly kind that sticks to your ribs. A boy flung a rock. It skipped off the dirt, missing its mark, but no one told him to stop. Somewhere nearby, a mangy dog barked once before lying back in the shade, uninterested in the cruelty unfolding. I've seen wicked things before, but cruelty carried out in broad daylight, with everyone pretending it was just another part of living. Weighs heavier than most sins. Folks whispered he'd been caught near the old copper shaft carrying blood on his shirt and another man's satchel. No witnesses, no proof. Just a story repeated enough times until it grew sharp enough to cut him down. The sheriff leaned against the hitching rail, chewing on a stalk of prairie grass, like this was no different than waiting out the afternoon heat. His eyes were half-lidded under the wide brim of his hat, lazy, unbothered, and that is when Eliza Carrington stepped into the square, 37, a widow near 4 years now, with grief worn into her bones like weather into old wood. She only stopped in Dry Creek for a jug of water and maybe a patch of shade, but when her eyes landed on the man kneeling in the dirt, she did look away. Something about the way he held himself still, not broken, not begging, tugged at her in a way she could explain. Heat shimmered between them, heavy as iron. Her hands tightened around the reins. Tucked inside her saddlebag was the only thing she still carried of her late husband, a Remington revolver, barrel polished smooth from years of use. It was worth more than most of the people in this town would see in a season, as wages. She did know the man, did know his crime. But she knew she was about to wager everything she had left to pull him out of that dirt. Eliza swung down from her horse, her boots sinking a little into the dry earth. The square hushed in that peculiar way where every shuffle of leather and clink of spurs seemed louder. The sheriff never moved, that lazy half-grin still resting on his face. She stopped a few feet from him. The sun bore down, heavy as judgment. Her hand slid into the saddlebag, fingertips grazing the cool metal of the Remington. She hadn't planned to part with it, but then again, she hadn't planned to watch a man cooked alive in the middle of town either. "You fixing to buy something, ma'am?" The sheriff drawled, voice slow and thick like honey over gravel. Eliza held the revolver out, grip first. "This is worth more than any fine you'll ever collect." He took it, turning it over, thumb tracing the walnut grip worn smooth. "You looking to trade that for him?" His chin tilted toward the man kneeling in the dust. She did answer, just held his eyes. The sheriff chuckled low in his throat. "Guess that is a yes." He tipped his head toward one of the deputies. The man stepped forward and yanked the sack free. Harsh light made the prisoner squint. His face was rough, tanned by sun and work, but the eyes steady. No pleading, no gratitude, just quiet watching. She could read him, and maybe that's what hooked her deeper. The ropes came off neck. He rose slowly, stretching shoulders like a man relearning freedom. The townsfolk muttered. Some looked sour, disappointed they lost their spectacle. Others just stared, curious what came next. The sheriff tucked the revolver into his belt. "It's yours now. Whatever trouble follows him, that's on you." Eliza did reply. She turned and walked toward her horse. The stranger followed, still silent. When he swung up behind her onto the saddle, she felt the shift of weight, solid, certain. They rode out of Dry Creek without looking back. The road stretched ahead, long and dusty. Eliza could shake the strange certainty that it was going to stay quiet for long. They'd been on the trail near an hour, far enough that the dust of town was little more than a memory. The track narrowed between ridges, and that's where she saw them. 2 riders ahead, sitting still as fence posts in their saddles, hats tipped low, rifles resting lazy across their thighs. Her gut tightened. She did slow, but her fingers shifted against the reins. She knew that kind of stillness. It never meant anything good. As they closed the gap, one man lifted his chin. "Afternoon," he drawled, dragging the word like he had nowhere else to be. "Fine horse you got there, and that is a healthy-looking partner riding along." The other man grinned, mouth missing too many teeth. Would be a shame if you rode on without sharing some of what you got. Eliza opened her mouth, maybe to bluff, maybe to stall. But before a word could escape, the man behind her moved. 1 second he was there, the next, his boots hit dirt, carrying him forward with a stride that left no room for hesitation. The first rider lifted his rifle, thinking it'd scare him off. It did. 3 steps, and the barrel was twisted from his grip. The man sent crashing to the ground. The second went for his pistol, but too slow. Eliza, as stranger, ripped him from the saddle, sending the gun skittering into the rocks. It was over almost before it began. No wasted shouts, no wasted motion, just 2 would-be thieves groaning in the dust, and a man climbing back onto her horse as if nothing had happened. She did. To ask where he'd learned to move like that. She figured she'd find out when the time was right, but one thing she knew, her trail was no longer going to be a quiet one. They rode on, silence stretching between them. Only the creak of leather and jingle of tack filled the air. The sun hung heavy, pressing down like a hammer. Eliza thought the 2 bandits were done with them. She was wrong. It started with a crow. S-cry sharp, too close. Then she saw movement. 3 riders coming hard from behind, and 2 more sliding out from a dry wash ahead. Same dust-stained coats. Same crooked grins, only this time they weren't alone. Her breath snagged. Trouble had found them again, and it wasn't going to be fair. "Keep riding," the man behind her murmured, his first words since Dry Creek. His voice was calm, but she felt the steel in it as his hand brushed the rifle tied to the saddle. The first shot cracked the air, sending her horse sideways in a panic. She yanked the reins, urging it forward. Bullets snapped close, canyon walls funneling the sound until it felt like thunder at her ears. "Left," he barked, and she did argue. They plunged off the trail, down a deer path choked with sage. Branches slapped her arms, dust clawed at her throat, but she pressed on. Behind, riders shouted, closing in, then falling back, then surging again. The trail dropped into a rocky gulch, narrow and treacherous. Twice she thought they'd lose footing, but his hand on her shoulder kept her steady. They splashed through a shallow creek, spray cooling her burning face, before breaking into a clearing thick with cottonwoods. He slid down, grabbed the reins, and pulled the horse into the shadow. "Stay quiet," he whispered. Hooves thundered past, close enough to shake the ground. She held her breath until the sound faded, until silence returned. She didn't know if they were safe. But she knew one thing, with this man, danger felt survivable, and she wasn't ready to face what the road would look like without him. By the time they stopped for the night, the sky burned gold, then crimson, before fading into deepening blue. He gathered wood, she spread blankets. Fire crackled, throwing shadows across his face. This man, nameless still, silent still, had been left for nothing just yesterday. But tonight, he was the reason she was alive. She thought of all the years she'd let grief trap her in one place, how she believed her life had ended the day her husband did come home. But maybe life does end. Maybe it waits for you until you're ready to live it again. They ate in silence, but it was heavy silence. It was the kind that meant more than words. Finally she spoke, not to ask his name, but to say, "You can stay if you want." He did answer right away. But when his eyes met hers across the fire, she knew life out here was hard, yes, but it was easier with someone who chose to ride beside you. Not out of duty, but because they wanted to, and maybe that's the thing. Sometimes the best parts of life are the ones we never planned on. So tell me, if you were in her boots, would you have stopped for him or kept riding? If you've been riding with us this far, tap that like button and subscribe. The trail is not over yet, and the road ahead, it's about to get a whole lot